What lies beyond human perception? No doubt we are quite limited by not only the jelly in our eyes, but the fat and meat within our skulls. Literally everything that we see, interpret, hear, taste, think, everything has to be filtered through a layer of humanity that can distort and alter what life may actually be. And this is a bit of a problem. Is it the human ideas that push the concept of there being something more beyond the third dimension, or is it an idea because our brains have glimpsed it and we just didn't know what we were seeing? This idea has remained prevalent throughout history because really, we don't have an answer to what lies beyond what our eyes are telling us. As we attempt to break down this door, I guess you could say, in the film From Beyond, humanity attempts to look beyond what sight can provide by reactivating what was considered to be a dormant sense within the brain, which is hilarious. By doing so, we could see beyond what our limitations have imposed biologically. But the question is there any truth to portions of our brains potentially harboring a lost sense? And if so, what areas would those be? Well, let's do what we always do and take a biological stance and try to figure out if there would be any possibility of this as we cover From Beyond. So also, before diving into it, quick heads up, YouTube did something, God knows what, to the algorithm. I know it switched to AI a while back in May. Ever since then, literally 72 hours, not a minute more or a minute later, my videos actually get pushed to you guys. It's been doing this for months now. None of the other channels that I have do that. I have no idea why this one's doing that. So the upload dates are around 11 to 12 p.m. Central Time on Fridays. You've likely been seeing them on Mondays. YouTube support says this was totally normal and should only last a few days. Well, it's been 3 months, so now you know. So we kick off today's story with a nerd typing on the computer. My God, this is meta. I'm also a nerd typing on the computer, watching a nerd type on his computer. By the way, this was 40 years ago when this came out, so if for some reason you want to feel old, well, there you go. As he eats a pencil, because why not, his computer is ready, going over to a machine and hitting a ton of buttons. How did he get the funding for all of this? Is he doing his work pro bono? Sighing a lot because that's what you do, he goes over to the soil sample collector in Helldivers and then starts it up. As wind kicks up, his head hurts as, well, what the hell is that thing? Looking at it immediately, it then bites him in the face as in he grabs it and holds it off. As he switches off the machine, he's bleeding as in he runs away down to the Petronius's room or whatever, Pretorius? I'm not sure what this other doctor's name. We're gonna call him Chest Hair and maybe later Kimono. He says it worked as Chest Hair then answers the door. What is this guy wearing? Switching on the resonator, that will not deliver the goods. Bro then starts tweaking out a little bit as the computer screen then shuts off. He doesn't want to shut it off as he starts saying he wants to see more than any man has ever seen. At this point, the resonator is running itself as in he claims something is coming. How he knows any of it. And by the way, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. It's him. Nothing else really shows up. So across the road, an old woman then calls in about how they are doing it again. Approaching the Crypt Keeper's house, the cops hung up on her, which is absolutely wild. As the dog ran inside, she effectively then trespasses into their house. Hearing the dog whine upstairs, she heads in further, as yelling can be heard to turn it off. Grabbing the dog, the door gets broken as Sweater Buttons then runs out of the building with her shortly behind. The cops show up next and then arrest him for, well, to be completely honest with you, I have no idea why they arrested him. He was just kind of chilling out. All they did was see a guy running and then immediately arrest him. Like, I'm pretty sure this guy still has rights, right? So as we flash over to Papa Chest Hair over there, lying face down in a kimono, we get From Beyond. From Beyond what exactly? Well, you'll just have to watch, even though I already spoiled it. Meeting Dr. Bulch, it's all glad hands and reading other doctors' work. Turtleneck is disgusted by Glass's work, apparently, and then heading in, she takes off her gloves and coat and necklace, but not earrings, because apparently those don't count. Passing by a window, one guy is crashing out in the window, as another then yells to get them out of there. Going to the last room on the right, the sweater button-up combo from earlier has been given no clothes and then just thrown into an asylum. On what grounds? I have no idea. She begins asking what exactly they were experimenting on and for what reason. The pineal gland, as the doctor believed, it was a dormant sensory organ. Now you may be asking yourself, why would our brain hold on to a dormant sensory organ? Well, it wouldn't. At all. Anyways, it ain't dormant, that's for sure. It regulates sleep like you wouldn't believe. Of course, it's around this time that likely this is when the idea that we only use like 10% of our brain was quite prevalent, which is hilariously stupid. Why would any, like, I'm not saying not any body, like, oh, any person, but like any body, considering how much energy, our brain uses 20% of the oxygen we breathe in and 20% of our calories. Why would it keep 90% of that as just like a, oh, you know, it's just for laughs. Anyways, discussing the pineal gland as like a third eye, she then asks if his experiments worked, stating nothing wrong was happening at first except for the fact that he decided to live with Dr. Kimono. He then says things are all around us in times existing, and we just can't see them. Well, if they can't interact with us and they're around us and we can't see them, then does it really matter? Without the resonator, we can't see them though, obviously, and even if they can see us, again, they can't interact with us, so why does it matter? He says one of the creatures then bit off the doctor's head like a gingerbread man by then twisting it. The orderlies come in and restrain him when he really didn't do anything to warrant them restraining him. This guy's like just getting, I'm pretty sure this is kidnapping at this point. So pulling him out of the room, they now get him prepped for an MRI to see if his third eye did in fact open. Being put into the MRI machine, he's freaking out some more, which I guess the resonator runs off magnetism and so does the MRI, so that scares him. Anyway, so then they scan his brain. The pineal gland is oversized and now extends to the optic nerve. Discussing if it's a tumor or not, they suggest it's actually just growing. It's not a tumor. This would be incredibly detrimental to your survival, putting internal pressure into your brain, and probably render you blind, especially if it's pushing on the optic nerve. So I'm not really certain this would even be survivable at all. Dr. Glasses wants to perform an experiment though, and Turtleneck says absolutely not. He says they are here to cure the infirmed and not use them as experiments, which she will totally do a 180 on this later for seemingly no reason other than she just doesn't like Glasses. Handing over the patient to Glasses, she then picks him up and says he's been released into her custody after he suggests he'll make an appointment with her office, and she's like, well, no, you have to stay with me. Again, under what ruling is this guy stuck with any of these people? So anyways, apparently he can either stay here and spend the rest of his life in that room or just come with her. Not given much of a choice, they then head out to the creeper van as they meet up with Sarge over here. He apparently played pro football. Heading back to the House of Wonders, Benevolent Street. Yes, very good. Sweater then starts crashing out as he tries to get out of the van. However, the youngling locks that were in place on the door were trapping him inside. Driving back up to the house, he does not want to go in there. Sarge is super happy to be there, apparently, for reasons unknown. And then heading inside, Sweater starts walking in like a total weirdo, saying there's nothing to be afraid of. Well, phallic meat monsters floating around might be a bit of an issue, especially if they're going to bite your face. Sarge immediately trips over some electrical cables as then he pulls out a flashlight in a well-lit building because apparently the power is out. Heading to the basement, Glasses deduces that the cables lead to the resonator. Sarge then finds the special fun time room as Glasses then watches chest hair on the TV doing something that needs to be completely blurred out because your young virgin eyes cannot handle the horrors of what's on the TV. Anyways, he was into some kinky stuff as then we jump over to Sweater, who has absolutely lost it. Probably from living with Chest Kimono Man for so long. Finding the resonator lab, and we'll hear more about what he heard when they were in the room of adults. Finding the resonator lab, they then find the chalk outline as they approach the resonator. Turning on the light, Sweater then goes to attack it as Sarge grabs him. Telling him to let him go, Bro continues being a crash out as he says that's where it ate him. Kneeling down on the chalk outline, all this talk is making Sarge hungry for dinner. Perhaps he is the phallic meat monster.
Damn, you know what? Actually, Sarge might have a point, because I'm actually kind of getting really hungry while editing this. Fast food, really? At that price? And it's bad for me? No, thank you. Only there was like a healthier alternative that could just deliver straight to my door and I don't have to sacrifice my diet. Oh wait, there is! That's today's sponsor!
But first episode is sponsored by Groons. What is Groons, you may be asking? Well, it's not just a multivitamin or a greens gummy or prebiotic. It's all of those in one, and it tastes absolutely delicious. Brother, let me tell you something. I love Groons, and they're not even paying me to say that part. I was looking for a methylated multivitamin because the stuff I buy at stores has cyanocobalamin in it, which, because of the super cool MTHFR gene that I apparently have, which is an enzyme that plays a role in folate metabolism, basically, I cannot process cyanocobalamin, which is the synthetic B12 that is in literally everything, like energy drinks, multivitamins, hydration packets, all that stuff, and it actually gives me horrific migraines if I do take it. Took me years to track it down, so if you get migraines, that might be why. But here comes Groons with the chair with actually methylated B12, so I can use it. And not only that, but it's also a little gummy that tastes great as well. I actually look forward to my multivitamins in the morning, and I feel better when I take them. So while yes, it is an integration, I actually pay for a subscription myself because I've found that as a multivitamin, I take it every day, and it's amazing. Containing 100% of the daily needed vitamins and 25% of the minerals you need, they also contain 3 times the dietary fiber you need compared to other green powders out there. And not only that, research supports that these are more absorbed by the body than if you just take the tablets. which you pee out most of those anyways. Honestly, I'd say they're sure worth a try. I remember showing my friends these, and now they have picked them up for themselves. So if you're interested in having a healthier tomorrow, click the link below in the description to get 61% off with free gifts. Plating the food, I have no idea what this is even supposed to be. I have never seen this food in my life. If you know what this is, let me know. Also, sweater. Bro, if you just take off your sweater, you'll probably stop sweating so much. You're in a house. Watching Glasses sleep, they then talk about how she's beautiful, which is a very weird conversation, as he begins telling Sarge about how Kimono would bring women to the house, and he would just lie in bed, and then he would listen to them screaming, and that's what made him snap. Yeah, dude, like, the whole thing is just very, very, maybe unnecessary. Was H.P. Lovecraft a little pent up, maybe? So waking up, she then asks if it's finished. Sweater had to bypass the computer, so the entire system has to be manually operated. He just basically installed a toggle switch. The Resonator emits a powerful magnetic oscillating field that will stimulate the pineal gland, allowing them to see whatever Sweater saw. Basically, you're going to take your brain and force grow it, which we typically call those tumors in cancer, glioblastomas. It's not great. Anyway, so he tells them not to move. When they're in the vibrations, it may see them. So again, he's like, so just make sure you stay absolutely still. Like, he made his point like 3 or 4 times. So he switches on the Resonator once more as everyone begins moving. Very good. Stop moving. As everything then vibrates, everyone's pineal glands start hurting. Right in the pineal. Anyways, looking at one another, they look up and see things as Sarge immediately forgets the rules and reaches out for one of those things as it bites his arm. Going to turn off the Resonator, they hear Sweater's name, telling him to show himself. Kimono exits out of the shadows as he looks at Glasses. Oh god, he's got no clothes on. Sweater then says he saw him die, as he says, no, I just passed beyond. He goes on to say he's the master here, which, considering he's the new guy in another dimension, I mean, he's ranking up pretty fast. Asking if it's really him, he says, well, why don't you touch me? No thanks. So reaching out for chest hair, he then touches his skin, as then he pulls some of it off. So then he pulls off his face, and he's like, my mind is indivisible, but my body's allowed to change. Bro, you're just ripping your face off. As Sarge then lights him up, but that goes over about as well as a wet fart in church, as then they shut off the Resonator, severing the link. Sarge then goes and throws up due to the overgrowth of the pineal gland, as Glasses claims she feels accelerated. Yes, this is how doctors and scientists talk. They, even in casual speaking terms, they sound like absolute nerds. So making eggs, he then tells Sweater he faced his fear and overcame. I guess. Talking about the pineal gland some more, she suggests that maybe schizophrenics could be influenced by the creatures if they have enlarged pineal glands. So basically, they would be the next step in human evolution. But unfortunately, that next step in human evolution is just basically seeing meat monsters everywhere. Yes, I guess. And I base that theory on absolutely nothing. The pineal gland helps regulate the sex drive too, according to Glasses, and she suggests they have to try to experiment again. You can kind of see what's kind of going on with Glasses here. She's also a little pent up. She wants to know more about chest hair. Sarge then suggests disappearing out the door, as Sweater says they need to do this only under very controlled conditions. Glasses tells Sweater there her old man spent 15 years in an institution before he met his end, so that's why she does all this. And hopefully it's not a genetic issue, because what she's displaying right now makes no sense. Sweater then throws a coffee mug as she says, everyone just go get some sleep and then we can all think about it. Except you have an enlarged pineal gland, so you're not going to be sleeping very well. So going to take a nap, she can't sleep, as her pineal gland is also enlarging. Sitting up, she looks up to where the Resonator is, as then she heads up there. Sick nightgown, by the way, and then going to touch it, she touches her head. All right, so Glasses, at this point, appears to be somewhat losing it. Meanwhile, Sweater is sleeping in a bed, which under no circumstances would I ever lie. At least, I hope he had a Clorox wipe or something to just kind of take care of that. Everyone is having bad dreams, as Glasses then switches on the Resonator once more. In pain, she says she has to see more, as he tells her to turn it off. Having her sex drive regulated, Bro is immediately like, well, I mean, why not? Sarge is basically down to clown, as chest hair is now in the room with him. Turning around, he's now Pizza the Hut as he extendo arms and grabs Glasses, telling them to join him forever. Just turn off the Resonator. I don't understand what the issue is here. Getting tackled by Sarge down the stairs because Sweater decided to go run off, chest hair starts going haywire with Glasses as he says he's going to kiss her. And with what, you may ask? Nothing good. Turning into some weird thing, we get a real funhouse down here as both Glasses and Sweater are getting their heads eaten, as then he rips the wires out of the wall while Sarge does, which then saves Glasses. Unfortunately, Sweater was de-haired in the process. This episode is sponsored by Key. Glasses rips the wires out, realizing, yeah, not one of my better ideas. She somehow believed that she could control it and that the idea was based on absolutely nothing, and she didn't know what she was dealing with, and she's kind of an idiot. She claims only one person could run the experiment, as Sarge then tells her this is not under control, because Sarge knows how to read a room. Telling her that they are leaving, he tells her to put on some clothes, unless she wants to be dragged out kicking and screaming wearing that, and she's bummed out that they won't be hanging out with the meat monster man, as then she puts her arm in leather straps. Okay, so at first I was like, maybe she's like just confused by them. No, it's going exactly the way that you think it's going. Up, she then runs into the donor leathers. Man, this whole thing is getting pretty strange, as then looking over at Baldy, Sarge loads up the van, as Glasses decides to put on some well-loved worn leather. Try saying that 3 times fast. Sitting down next to Baldy, she then checks out his stylish sucker marks. She then goes to wake him up. You know where that hand's going. As Sarge then comes back in spotting this, asking her, what are you doing? He then tells her the van is ready. As she approaches, Glasses is lost in the sauce. Meanwhile, wires downstairs start arcing as he tells her to look at herself and then asks if that's who she really is. She doesn't know who she is, as then the resonator is then started back up. Sarge goes upstairs to prevent it from turning on, as then it switches on. If this is reminding anybody of Hellraisers a little bit, yeah, that's probably, I don't know, is the 80s, dude. So Sarge goes to pull some of the wires as everyone is engulfed in bugs. Cutting the wires, they just keep arcing. So like, pull them away a little bit more. Voltage can only go so far. So shining the flashlight on them, the bugs instead go after Sarge, covering him, I guess because they didn't want to be in the light, and eating his pants for reasons unknown. They then eat the rest of them. I guess they just wanted to eat them. Anyways, running over to him, well, I'm gonna go ahead and say Sarge is probably gone. Why they didn't get eaten and he did is beyond me. Meanwhile, crab people are in the corner. It's allegedly the doctor, and he has an eye coming out of his head now. It's his pineal gland. Baldy then straight up starts tweaking as his own pineal gland exits out of his head. He says it's beautiful, which, judging by his vision, I don't really think it looks beautiful. It looks kind of dumb to me. Grabbing Glasses, she then sprays the resonator to stop it from functioning. I don't know what she's spraying with it, or what even that is, as then she runs over to Baldy. It turns back on, as then she sprays it some more, and then she finally gets it to kind of switch off more permanently. Why not just push it over or something? I have no clue. Baldy ain't looking so great, as he's then brought to the ER where we are now. Expert chubby emu reference. Turtleneck then goes in and touches it. Ew, dude, stop touching it like that. But she can't get a hold of it. Eventually, it does come out of his head, as then she just sort of decides to leave that. Glasses then tells them the story of what had happened, as Turtleneck tells her she's contemptible. They think she's gone crazy, as she tells Bossman the machine needs to be destroyed. They really quickly just start labeling her as crazy and then lock her up with literally zero protocol. I don't think you can do this. It's like, oh, you're feeling a little off today? Well, you're obviously crazy. It's time to be committed. There are no judges in the county at all to say any of this. We are the judge, jury, and executioner. At this point, Turtleneck then sentences Glasses to electroshock therapy as the nurse protests this. I don't think this woman has the authority to do that. And then quoting hospital policy, which is the actual ruling, Turtleneck says, you're just supposed to follow orders. Yeah, okay. At this point, a solid right hook would take care of this whole issue with Turtleneck. She looks pretty brittle anyways. So Glasses then makes a break for it as the orderlies grab her. Meanwhile, Baldy is back up in action. Going to exit the hospital, yes, this guy looks totally normal and would not attract attention at all, especially his hunched over posture and bulging forehead. Listen, I know a thing or two about bulging foreheads. This guy puts everyone to shame. That's like a 6 head. So seeing everything through his eyes, which is basically just a virtual boy, I don't really see how it's supposed to be beautiful. Then again, my pineal gland must be dormant. Strapping down Glasses, she then tells them it's not necessary. Correct. And when you get out of there, suing the hospital is step 1. Step 2 is using your newfound millionaire status to build your own resonator with blackjack and hookers. Turtleneck now goes to check on Baldy as she realizes that he's gone. Finding him in the psychology lab, he desires brains apparently, because that's what happens when your pineal gland is more developed. He thinks they taste delicious, as then he looks down and realizes that he is eating a brain, and I swear he just sort of shrugs. Asking what's happening to him, they don't know for sure. Grabbing him and bringing him to the hallway, his pineal gland then goes into maximum overdrive, as then he sucks out turtleneck's eyeball and assumedly just starts going after her brain and her inferior pineal gland. So as they go to do the electroshock therapy on Glasses, which again, you probably, first off, this is really old technology, and I think you still need approval to do it, even in the 80s. So who's like the real villain in this movie? The meat monster or just monsters? But this whole process seems entirely screwed. So Glasses now escapes and steals the van as Baldy then calls out to her, but she doesn't hear him because she's in a van. An ambulance now arrives, bringing a homeless guy into the hospital as Baldy's pineal gland starts pinealing. The other EMT then calls out to the other who was wheeling the homeless man in, as in the homeless man tries to tell her what he saw, but he can't, as in the other EMT's eyeball has been sucked out. Going then to suck out the other EMT's eyeball, he smashes her head as the pineal gland then goes back into his own head, with the homeless guy absolutely losing it. Stealing the ambulance, Baldy then takes off as Glasses pulls back up to the pad. Entering the funhouse once more, she looks around and sees a chalk outline where Sarge's body was. Wait a minute, where did she get TNT from? And how does she know how to wire this? Setting it for 5 minutes, the fuse box begins to arc once more as Glasses is then dragged into the playroom by Baldy, telling Baldy that the resonator is about to concussively and energetically expand. His pineal gland comes out once more, as then he starts going after her eyeball. Should have worn glasses. Biting his pineal gland off. Oh my god. Can you think about your pineal gland being bit off? That sounds pretty painful. Asking for help. Oh good, Kimono has now made the scene. Baldy tells him he can't make love apparently. Like, dang, way to out bro like that. Having his feelings hurt. Oh god, he can now fly. And then goes after Baldy's head, as then he just straight up twists it off. Well, that was some short-lived heroism. Worm creatures now bite off Glasses' restraints as those were moving, and then bro just run, but pulling a match, she then throws that as she takes off. Finding Baldy currently more than bald. Too much head and shoulders has been used, I guess. She runs back upstairs as water starts appearing at the stairs for reasons unknown, with the meat monster being just that, a meat monster. She's also only got like 30 seconds left before this whole place blows. Komodo then grabs her as more crap starts protruding out of his body. Baldy then exits his body as well, as then he turns to her and tells her to run, but it appears like a fight is happening internally. What is happening here? I have no idea, and they're like, hey, we got like 20 pounds of goop, let's just use it. Jumping at the last second from the window, Glasses then has seemingly broken her leg in that fall, which that knee injury, that's probably for life, as the old lady from earlier approaches saying she already called 911. Telling her it ate him, she starts crying and laughing, which has apparently driven her insane, which, I mean, I don't know, man. It seems like a pretty easily solvable situation in the mind to me. I don't think it would really drive you that crazy, but thus concludes From Beyond. Hello and welcome to the science portion. So, what in the name of all that is holy is going on here? Well, as per usual, I have a few ideas as to why they would have assumed at this point in time that maybe the pineal gland was more important or maybe potentially had other functions, but it's still pretty important to remember neurobiology was like not in some weird infancy stage at this point in time. We as a species, we're not just like banging coconuts together, hitting a triangle and asking the gods to tell us what was going on. Instead, the brain had actually been fairly mapped out around this time frame, and we knew mostly what their functions were, even if this was 40 years ago. Also, 2026 is as far away from 2000 as 2000 was from 1974. Time is a nightmare. Anyhow, so really, I think the first thing that we need to discuss is where this idea concerning the pineal gland being a long dormant sensory organ even comes from in the first place, because it's not without its own merit. And then we will talk about how its actual function is not a third eye, and what the growth may actually be inspired by, and what are the effects of maybe even a tumor-like growth that could come later. The pineal gland in many animals served as more than what it does for us, but that doesn't mean it's vestigial for humanity. Back in the day when we found this thing, it was pretty odd in its placement and how just completely isolated it was from the rest of the brain. Well, maybe not completely isolated, but it does appear to be mostly on its own. It is located roughly at the center of the brain in an area known as the epithalamus. Its placement puts it near the third ventricle of the brain, right between where the fourth ventricle connects. Basically, this is where the cerebral spinal fluid enters the brain. Once here, it can cool the brain, well, the cerebral spinal fluid does, provide support to the nerd in your skull, and in general, it just kind of moves nutrients into the brain, like vitamins, minerals, all those happy things you would like to be flowing around in there to keep you alive. But because of its positioning and isolation relative to other brain tissue, it was assumed that this gland may be connected to the mind, or back in the day, I should clarify this. Back in the day, it was assumed it connected like the mind and soul to the body, and it passed through this specific organ. A cool idea, but with its actual function, it's gonna be way less cool. The more we learn about everything, the lamer everything becomes. Once finding this roughly pea-sized protrusion in the brain, it became a massive amount of like point of interest because an idea began to form around it. Humanity is quite limited in our capacity to perceive the world. We see electromagnetism in an extremely small band of what is known as visible light. I mean, even birds got us beat with the ultraviolet spectrum. Everything looks like Avatar to them. Everything to us during the winter looks like crap. Our light detection is not that great in the grand scheme of things, as our night vision also really kind of blows. Our hearing isn't very powerful, as many other predators or even prey animals around our species are better at it. And when it comes to our sense of smell, laughably bad. We can smell things, but it has to be virtually overpowering to other animals for just us to even detect it. And this is because we took all of our talent points and put them into our eyesight and brain function. That is how our bodies became the capable hunters that they are, but also persistence hunting because we're just friggin' awesome. Now, because of this absolute nerfing in terms of senses, when the pineal gland was discovered, the thinking was, well, maybe this is a dormant sensory organ, something humanity could unlock through the power of science if we could just figure out how to use it. I mean, when we looked at other animals, such as sharks having the ability to sense electrical fields, birds seeing in ultraviolet, and snakes sensing the body heat of animals, then surely we had some sort of superpower too. Unfortunately, our superpower will be like Meg Griffin when they all got superpowers in Family Guy. We can grow our fingernails in and out. Of course, our brains also allow us to literally hold back the forces of nature and survive winter with ease. It's because we have the ability to create buildings and internal heating, but you kind of get the idea. Because humanity is number one, this is our rock, and that's just what it is. And guess what we're going to do when we can finally live on other planets? We're going to put some buildings on that bad boy that are going to keep out the crappy atmosphere around us. Anyhow, pro-humanism aside, the animals around us, utilizing their pineal glands primarily, have a leg up in light detection in general. Their pineal glands function to identify small amounts of light. In some reptiles, it's known that the pineal gland really is super photosensitive, not to be confused with photosynthesis. It took me like 12 takes on that one. Anyways, not in the way that the retina is photosensitive, but within reptiles, this is where the concept of the third eye would start to come into play. If it existed in reptiles, then why did it not exist in humanity in the same capacity? As this concept remained pretty rooted in at least some evolutionary biology for early forms of animals, again, like reptiles, they came just after amphibians, so some of their traits are really, really old, whereas mammalian traits have changed over time, sort of like why fish have swim bladders, yet we have lungs. The idea that it could be a human third eye continued to hang on, and if we could just activate it, possibly we could see into different worlds that wouldn't be perceived prior. And the reality is, being three-dimensional creatures, we cannot really perceive likely everything that there is potentially to perceive. Now, this idea is really just based on the concept that there are other dimensions out there that we are simply not capable of understanding because our bodies are physically limiting us. It's the idea of a two-dimensional creature. If that did exist, then a three-dimensional creature, which would be us, there's really nowhere like a two-dimensional creature could hide from us because we could simply walk around any barrier that puts it, I guess, behind it, because there is no third dimension, so there's no depth, and anything that's fundamentally it would be behind, which in and of itself indicates depth, would be something that we could just go around. We could see its body as well, or into its body, because there's no depth, and it would only be able to perceive us in pieces or slices because there would be no depth to its body, so it doesn't know that there's depth to our bodies. It's basically going to be incredibly limited. The same idea applies to a third-dimensional creature, which is us, with a hypothesized fourth-dimensional creature. Our brains could only perceive it in slices of time. If you think of time this way, it's not so much like think of time like not a progression and something that we can just like at will move through in any direction, and instead something that is able to just be traversed. It would appear like, for us anyhow, that as the timeline continues, while at first you didn't have a memory of any creature finding you, suddenly it would appear because in the past it actually showed up. So imagine trying to put a barrier between yourself and that creature, right? Use your third dimensional knowledge of it, because you existing at this point in time, that's all you can really use, so you run behind a wall. But it simply just goes back in time prior to you even doing that in the first place, and then it can see you before you even went behind the barrier. To you, it would be strange because while you were behind the wall or door or whatever it is, then suddenly you would have a memory of it already finding you because it simply went back in time and then found you. This perception of the universe is why people were so interested in the pineal gland. Could it be that there was maybe an unseen world around us? Well, what's funny about this is, if there was, why can it not interact with us? I mean, Sweater's face got bitten. That's a predator of sorts, and if the only thing preventing us from seeing it is perception, then why does it matter if it could see us or not anyhow? Well, it was around the 1950s, however, that the idea started to run off a cliff in terms of mysticism and cool potential. Basically, we discovered it's actually a gland of sorts that was supplying melatonin and helping to regulate circadian rhythm. When light enters the eyes for humans, it travels along the optic nerve, and given how close the pineal gland is to this structure, the signal will eventually reach the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, which is located within the hypothalamus. From here, there is a synaptic gapway that branches off into several other structures, with one of those being the pineal gland. This communication is critical to understanding how it regulates the body because it goes beyond that. It would appear that blue light in particular, interpreted from the retina and communicated through the optic nerve, actually may jump to the pineal gland directly, at least in some capacity. This informs the pineal gland that there is daylight around, which is why blasting your retinas with phone light before bed, like I do, is a horrible idea. The process of how it works is pretty straightforward, as light is detected by the human retina. This is pretty profound given that it's the organ we typically use in order to navigate the world around us. Our eyesight is actually crazy compared to other animals. As light falls onto the retina, the brain clock, as it's known, which is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is why Supra is so cool, Toyota Supremacy, alters the behavior of the sympathetic nervous system. As it does this, the nerves connected to the pineal gland inform it of what is happening, which then the pineal gland will release melatonin. While not a straightforward sedative, it does tell the rest of the body that it's time to chill out and get ready to hit the hay by indicating to the rest of the meat suit that it's biological nighttime. The reason is your body does not have the ability to see, if you didn't know. You do, sort of, like with your eyes, obviously, but apart from maybe even feeling the sun on your skin, the rest of your body has no idea what time it is otherwise. And given the biological nighttime status, desire to sleep increases, body temperature will begin to fall somewhat, and then you begin to feel tired. But the most interesting part is how it actually changes over time. When the pineal gland detects summer days versus winter days, it'll actually start to factor in the tilt of the earth into human biology. Like, you ever hear of cuffing season? If you haven't, it's basically, if you haven't, I'm sorry, but when the days start getting shorter and the nights start getting longer, why do we shack up more often with one individual? Well, hopefully it's one individual. STDs are out there, brother, and you need to be careful. Basically, on a hormonal level, your brain is telling you the environment is changing. Also, completely unrelated, I feel like this needs to be said because I actually had a conversation with somebody about this the other day. HSV1 versus HSV2. I know, we just talked about STDs, so my brain immediately went to that. Cold sores are HSV1, right? And then HSV2 is what you have, which are genital herpes. You need to understand you can get both of those in both places. You can get HSV2 on your mouth, and you can get HSV1 on your gear. It's just the HSV1 variant prefers, I believe it's the trigeminal nerve in the brain, or near the brain, and that's usually where it houses itself, whereas HSV2 prefers the sacral ganglia, which is in the pelvic region. But it's important to understand it can go either. A lot of people, for some reason, seem to think cold sores are HPV. They are not. They are HSV1. And what's interesting about it is it's hypothesized that HSV2 actually jumped from a chimp-like species, I guess would be the best way to put it, way back in the day, which means somebody hooked up with a chimp, but it was probably during the Erectus era. So that means essentially it's newer to humanity, whereas HSV1 has been with humanity the whole time. So HSV2 was in a condition or an environment where the immune systems were stronger, so it became more aggressive, whereas HSV1 was dealing with the human immune system, and then it learned how to basically live with it. So something to always remember there. Anyhow, now you know, and knowledge is power. Be safe out there. So basically, on a hormonal level, your brain is telling you the environment is changing. Because cold is coming, your brain will start to seek out some warmth. Other humans produce body heat too, which is warmth. You become more likely to bed down for longer hours, which would also keep you warm, and having another person there aids in your survival naturally. Now, this is not as strong in humans as it is in other animals. The pineal gland will actually straight up regulate when it's time to engage in the horizontal mambo for them, but for humans, we just kind of do it all the time. And we still have similar behaviors, though, as the days get shorter and the nights get longer. And this is why a lot of people are born in the fall. And given it's August, cuffing season is upon us once more, so be careful out there. So as the seasons shift, the pineal gland shifts alongside it and will continue to alter behavior, sometimes making you feel more sleepy and lethargic during these months. I mean, some animals go into straight up hibernation, though, so it's important to remember, though, this does not exist in humans. It does appear, however, we are down-regulated to a degree as the brain becomes sort of aware due to the pineal gland's activity that the environment is changing slightly and it's time to kind of go back inside for a little bit. So it's not so much that the pineal gland is a third eye, but it is activated by the effects of light. You can see why then they thought maybe it was a dormant sensory organ, a way to see into the world. So then the question concerning the movie specifically is, why did it grow and how was the Resonator able to help with this? Well, strap in because this part may actually make some sense, at least in a way. Human biology is quite hilarious. Did you know our brain makes sand? Well, maybe not sand, but it's what we call basically a form of sand. As we age, our pineal glands have a tendency to calcify somewhat. Obviously, this isn't a great thing apparently, but it does happen to all of us if we live long enough. This calcification will begin to impede sleep function over time, which is why the elderly only sleep for about a few hours a night. And this is considered to be a normal function of aging, and really, at our current understanding, there is no way to prevent or reverse this. So, tough break for humanity, but I believe this calcium may play a role over time. Also, don't be too worried about it. If you're over the age of 18, it's already mostly happened. Anyhow, so let's discuss the Resonator, as I believe this in turn will help us understand the pineal growth because clearly they are related to one another. When the Resonator is activated, it emits what is stated to be an oscillating electromagnetic field. Seemingly, this should be beyond what is standard with an MRI machine. These fields also must be fundamentally different in their oscillation because an MRI still produces a fairly strong magnetic field. As these waves travel through the surrounding area, they appear to activate the pineal gland and alter its function. This alteration, I think, is more important as it goes beyond just the activation of the pineal gland, given it's already active anyhow. So we see everyone here is an adult. We also know that the brain sand and calcification have already likely begun to calcify a significant portion of the pineal gland. One of the things to note about neural communication is that the brain actually uses calcium in cell signaling, and there are effects on electromagnetism with this specific cation. Why did I say cation like that? Who really knows? But these are considered to be one of the most important molecules, and it takes the form, again, as a positively charged cation due to it losing 2 electrons when it forms. So when the well, it doesn't form, but you get what I'm saying. It was formed a long time ago in a sun, but whatever. Anyways, so when the electromagnetic field is fired up, it would then have the effect of altering the actual electrical behavior of the membrane of neurons in the pineal gland itself, which in turn would alter how calcium is then signaling within the cell. And this can have other effects further downstream of altering the gene expression of the cell itself. And this in turn likely would begin causing the cells specifically within the pineal gland to begin entering pretty much just straight up mitosis. The brain typically will not undergo this level of mitosis because this would be absolutely detrimental to itself. I mentioned this in a lot of videos, but adding brain tissue is really bad for your longevity, which we will discuss this right after this part of the video. So as cells begin to mitotically divide, it would not happen like this in real life, obviously. It would basically just be a tumor. But in the movie, it is operating with the assumption that this is a dormant sensory organ, and by waking it up, it has its own genetic predisposition towards forming a stalk and what appears to be an eye. It was never just able to form properly, I guess, under normal circumstances. Sort of like how some humans can be born with vestigial tails that are then cut off, but most of us are not born with tails. And this indicates that the genes that exist within specifically the pineal gland will in turn be activated. So it just really comes down to gene expression through calcium signaling. We actually know this happens for every one of us, and the best example I like to use are the Hox genes, which are responsible for the actual formation of our bodies and how they are structured. Once completing their tasks, they are then shut off for our own good, and this will prevent extra limbs from growing out of your limbs and then other issues forming. Of course, if we can figure out how to actually activate these correctly, then we could possibly regrow limbs in people, which would be fantastic. So in this way, the pineal gland in From Beyond is suggesting that once the pineal gland forms, the other genes are not allowed to continue, because if they did, then this means the stalk with the eye would then form next. Why this would take place, however, is interesting, because if it had this if we had this at some point in the past, this means we were intentionally nerfed by something, or we hail from something that did have these, but it was intentionally taken away from humanity. And as this expands out of the brain, this extra eye can see in different ways that we cannot. Adding another layer of depth to create what is known as trinocular vision, this is how it is able to see creatures around us, as 2 of our eyes alone are not capable of actually achieving this. And if you think trinocular vision is like stupid, well, I believe it's the mantis shrimp has that actually. But what impacts would a rapidly spearing pineal gland blasting out of your frontal plate actually do? Well, nothing good. happens when the pineal gland actually continues to grow. We've actually seen these with pineal tumors, and it's pretty bad. The pineal gland in real life, as it grows, and it's cancerous, in the movie obviously it has functions, so its usability increases as it grows. However, with cancer, the opposite relationship is true. It becomes less useful, and circadian rhythms will definitely tank. And not to mention, if it's growing the pineal gland, the electromagnetic field, what happens if you grow brain tissue in general? Well, the major problem is going to be, what do you do with all the heat that's generated? By doubling up on tissue, your brain will actually hold on to more heat, cooking itself, and then also your thought process would be much slower because there would be more tissue to move through. Now, there is a specific amount that our brain can grow where it's actually going to be beneficial and maybe we become more intelligent, but doubling up on tissue is really, really bad for your brain. Not to mention the skull is immovable, so, you're just going to basically put pressure on your brain and it's not going to be good. But the pineal is also really close to other structures in the brain that critically need to function. The cerebral aqueducts, they're going to be a huge issue. And considering this sits between the third and fourth aqueduct, its placement means that it will compress these aqueducts, which will actually cause CSF to build up and have nowhere to go. As this happens, this will cause compression in the brain, which in turn will destroy the brain tissue, which as it destroys it, this is actually how schizophrenia presents, because the tissue around the ventricles will begin to erode away, which in turn will cause many issues like hallucinations, and sometimes aggression because the hallucinations are telling you things and maybe you're just tired. But anyways, this has other issues as well, because intracranial pressure increases. It'll start as like maybe a headache, maybe some nausea, but as it progresses, vomiting will begin. And it's always interesting to see why this happens, because when the body's trying to get rid of something that has no capability of getting rid of, you always vomit. Like, we need to figure out how to vomit brain fluid. Anyways, so lethargy sets in next, followed by just general confusion. And as the pressure continues to dangerous levels, visual hallucination problems would have began long ago as they have pushing on the optic nerve. And ultimately, if you don't fix the issue or no shunts are installed to get rid of the CSF, this will lead to severe brain damage, a coma, and eventually your flatline. So not great. And if none of this happened and the pineal gland stalk somehow didn't damage this area, you're talking about not only pushing through the thalamic and diencephalic structures, but the frontal lobe itself. Oh, and then you have tissue covering the brain, and then the biggest problem is the literal skull. No shot something that soft as the tissue of the pineal gland is doing any of that. However, with all this said, how might it do it? Just as a thought experiment. Well, you remember calcium. I think calcium may actually form a spear-like structure that then pierces the actual skull and as well as the brain, allowing it to exit out of the skull, because soft tissue wouldn't be capable of that. So basically, I think I just ruined this movie's premise, but now you know all about the pineal gland, so there's that. But anyhow, I hope you enjoyed learning about the pineal gland. Don't take a shot every time I said pineal gland. You won't survive. If you did enjoy, then please leave a like and a comment. This helps get the video out there. As I mentioned earlier, YouTube switched to AI. It's been a crapshoot, so anything helps. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Instagram links, as well as Roanoke Games, where I'm uploading live streams. All that'll be down in the description. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Kusith. Thank you, Brosith, for your awesome continued support. At the Astrophysicist tier, we have Des Dancer, Webtron Supreme, and Eddie the Ingy. Thank you guys as well. And at the Scientist tier, we have the Chat of Chuds, Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, SSJ4 Lotus, and Gina Elaine. Thank you. And to the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards helping out around here, so thank you. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.